Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this session on the occasion of International Women's Day being organized by GDI. And I would like to, at the very outset, thanks all the panelists who have been agreed and take out the time for being a panelist on these two sessions. The two sessions today have been thoughtfully crafted and will focus on two different aspects of women in the social sector. And it's indeed a privilege to gather here today with you all and have a panel of leaders who have committed to drive positive social change and creating a more gender equitable and a gender inclusive society. If you look at India's social sector today, I personally believe that women have been the key architects of transformative change that is underway, working tirelessly to uplift communities, champion causes, amplify voices of those who have long been marginalized. Whether we look at grassroots activists, NGO founders, social entrepreneurs, policymakers, philanthropists, and across domains in the social sector per se, especially in India, women have been at the forefront of addressing some of the most pressing, challenging, and issues which are facing our societies. At GDI is an impact sector consulting firm, and we have been privileged to have contributed to multiple gender-oriented programs within the sector, aiming to solve for both social issues and economic challenges that unfortunately disproportionately continue to affect most of the women in today's time. But having said that, from my personal opinion, I also believe that a lot of work is underway. A lot of positive work is underway, which is working towards making India a more gender inclusive and equal society. Some of our work revolve around. I'll just give a few examples, like prevention of child marriage in India. This is a big menace that is there. Unfortunately, we are still at a place where around 20 to 25% of the girls get married even before the age of 15. I mean, that's just something that we are working towards on developing a roadmap to eliminate this menace from the society. Moving forward, on another front, we are working with government of Rajasthan to solve for the education and the learning levels of close to 1 million girl students. And lower learning levels, we all know, is one of the key reasons that girls drop out from the schools, maybe after 8th, some after 10th, some after 12th, leading to parents getting them married at an early age and making them economically dependent on their families for the future. So that's another problem statement that we have been working on. Now, moving forward toward the economic opportunities, we are working with National Rural Livelihood Mission to create a kind of a digital public interface. We're calling it as low operating system, low OS, that digitizes the financial transaction between close to 8 crore women SHG members. Now, the moment these financial transactions get digitized, that basically leaves a digitized trail of transactions which will help them access formal financial institutions, which they so far have not been able to access to. I think this is progressing fairly well, and we hope that this gets mainstream in the next few years so that the access to economic opportunities improves. And very interestingly, one of our another work areas is how do we leverage the private sector to give financial as well as economic opportunities to the women from lower income households. We generally look at access to economic opportunities or financial opportunities more from a social angle, but how does the private sector organizations play a part in that without having much tweak in their business models? So that is another area that we have looked at so far. So that's from outside, and as we are sitting here today, I'm very also proud to share that close to 50% of our workforce, GDI team members are 50. So we are gender equal, if I can say that. Okay, I think now segueing to the two sessions that we have today, we will have the opportunity to delve deeper into two aspects of the women in social sector, as I said. In the first section, we have an esteemed panel of women achievers who have contributed immensely in the social sector through their work. They have dedicated their lives to the social work per se. And we hope to learn from the journey of these women achievers, including their experiences, challenges, triumphs, and how they and their work in the social sector has contributed towards a larger impact on the life of the women. In the second session today, we'll segue into a different aspect as to how centered around women beneficiaries, gender-oriented programs, how the private and social sector, if they come together or individually, can drive some of the positive economic and social impact in their lives. Without taking much time and allowing and moving towards the sessions, uh, I now invite my colleague Darshita to take the lead and take us through the first session. And welcome all the panelists. I can see cool smiling faces. Looking forward to both these sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohit. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for gracing us with your presence on this Friday morning. A very warm welcome to our GDI's event as we come together and celebrate International Women's Day today. It's truly a pleasure to have each and every one of you here. My name is Darshita and I'm working with GDI as a consultant, and I'm honored to be your moderator for this session, Women in Leadership Driving Social Change. Over the centuries, we have seen that leadership has predominantly been dominated by men. However, now we are seeing that this narrative is slowly changing, and 21st century has witnessed a significant increase in women taking up leadership roles across sectors, and social sector is no behind. Despite the ongoing challenges we see, the growing presence of female leaders has had really good effects on a cultural and political landscape, because it's because of the diverse perspectives and experiences females bring to the table. Women in India, they are making a really good mark in the social sector, transforming the communities from the grassroots to taking CXO level positions these days. Today, our panel comprises of these inspiring women leaders who are leading diverse initiatives across different domains in the social sector, and their professional journeys are marked by a wealth of expertise and diversity. Throughout this session, we will delve into more of their experiences, their insights, and the challenges they have encountered, and how they are leading the initiatives today. The key objective of our today's session is to discuss some strategies on how to support and enhance the young professionals, young women professionals in the social sector to thrive in the leadership position. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel of speakers for the day. We have Shruti Deora with us. Shruti is a partner working with the business consulting team at Intellecap, building solutions at the intersection of climate and gender. Shruti is a passionate social impact consultant who is having 12 plus years of experience in the sector and has worked on sectors across education, livelihood, healthcare, and gender with multinational organizations, foundations, corporates, and nonprofits. Prior to Intellecap, she has worked with Satwa Consulting, KPMG, and Goldman Sachs across geographies such as US, India, Africa, and Middle East. She has also recently co-founded Abhiyan Wealth to promote financial literacy and assist people to build wealth. She is a CA and holds an MBA degree from IIM Kozhikode. Pleasure to have you, Shruti, with us. Our second speaker for the session is Samar Bajaj. Samar is currently a director in the India program team at MSDF and is leading projects across education and livelihoods. She has worked and partnered with many mission-driven organizations to scale high-impact initiatives. Before MSDF, Samar spent almost 10 years with BCG and EY. She has worked across multiple sectors, including media, consumer internet, FMCG, and retail. Samar is an economics graduate from LSR and holds a dual degree in Masters in MPA from LSE and Sciences Po. Pleasure to have you, Samar, with us for our today's event. Our third speaker for the session is Shriya Sethi. Shriya is the director at Center for Social Impact at McKinsey, India. She is co-leading the firm's social impact practice and driving projects in livelihoods, economic development, gender, and education. And prior to McKinsey, Shriya has worked with International Innovation Corps as the country director, supporting large-scale development programs. And along with this, Shriya has been a board member across organizations such as Vadhwani AI and Seva Bharat. Shriya holds an MBA degree from Chicago Booth School of Business. Thank you, Shriya, for joining us today. Our fourth speaker for the session is Nidhi. Nidhi is the co-founder and CEO at Navgurukul, and an edtech organization empowering girls from the underserved communities and providing them a platform to get better opportunities in the tech sector. Nidhi is an alumna of Harvard Graduate School of Education. She has worked with multiple edtech startups in the past, such as educational initiatives, Newton, Harvard X, across India and US in the product and management roles. Prior to Navgurukul, she also co-founded Empower Ed, an edtech startup in the space of building 21st century skills. Now, thank you, Nidhi, for joining us today. Now, I'll set the agenda for our today's session. We'll have this session in 3 parts. First, we'll get to know more about our speakers and we'll deep dive into their experiences. Second, we'll have a panel discussion where we'll discuss all the interesting questions shared by you all in the Google form. Third, towards the end, towards the last 15-20 minutes, we'll open the floor to our audience to take all the questions you might have. Now let's deep dive into our discussion. Samar, I would like to begin with you. If you could shed some light on what are some of the underlying factors that play a role in the struggles of a leader who is leading social impact initiatives in the development sector, women leader.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for having me. So maybe I'll just talk a little bit about how I came to the social sector and try and contextualize my thoughts in context of, what I have experienced. So my background has predominantly been in the corporate consulting side. I had a degree in economics. I studied public policy, but I think maybe it's now at the foundation that I'm finally getting to use some of that. But over 10 years, I kind of spent in the corporate sector. Honestly, for me, I think the transition to the social sector as a woman was easier. I did feel that as a leader, it's a little bit easier to be a woman leader in the social sector. Specifically, when you're looking at, I would say, more of the field building and the funding side, there is a lot of openness to many more perspectives, which I think in the more on the corporate side, there are certain ways of doing things and you have to kind of fit into that culture. If you don't fit in, it's always hard, right? And I think that's not just if you're a woman. I think, if you are intuitive and, your culture is analytical, you will always find it hard to fit into that. So I did feel that, like, more generally, the social sector has a lot of diversity of opinions. It is able to hold space for many different types of people. And I think I've just found that to be very enjoyable. So that's one piece. I think the second piece, again, I've been very lucky, is that like at the foundation at one point in time, I think 2022, when I got promoted to the leadership team, we used to have 3 leaders in India and all 3 were women. So we said we must hire some men to actually show more diversity in our leadership team. And then we went and hired 2 men as well. So now we're a little bit more of a gender balanced leadership team. But I think somewhere, have always had the opportunity, I think, in all the organizations that I've worked with, where, it's been merit versus gender, which has, really played a role in getting to a leadership position. But maybe 2 things that I want to highlight, which have been more recent reflections for me. I think one, I recently became a mother. I became a mother very late in life. And so I think I didn't face, or I didn't even fully empathize with the challenges of trying to balance family and work. And I think it is just so hard. And so there needs to be, I think, a lot more recognition in workplaces, whether they're in the social sector or any other sector, around how do we really create space. And I think, it's not. And again, I think, again, to take an example from my consulting times, I used to hate it, like when my managers would be working part-time, and then, I'll be the consultant who's working really hard on the deck. And I just couldn't understand, I would just, I was so non-empathetic to that. And I think until somewhere you kind of experience it yourself, either yourself or, see somebody else going through those struggles, it's really hard to empathize. So I still feel like that for me is the biggest challenge that we have to solve for, not just leadership in the social sector, but I think leadership for women in general, is just really being able to solve for this, because I think it's a huge struggle. And then, at senior positions, you really start questioning, why am I here? Is it just for some money? I don't even need to make this money. Why I'd just rather spend this time with my family. So I think that's one piece. The other piece, which I think maybe is more specific to the social sector, and hopefully we can touch upon it later, is also that, the future or the trajectory of social sector organization not very stable. One, because it's subject to a lot of funding inflow and outflow, and lots of externalities which are not always in control of the organization itself. That I think is a big difference from how the corporate world works, because in the corporate sector you can actually make 10-year plans and you can kind of somewhat deliver to them, unless there's a big external shock. But I think the social sector has so much higher interconnectedness across many different actors that it's sometimes hard to think very long term. And sometimes when you don't have that stability, as an organization also, then you're not really sure how many leadership positions you have, how many people you can actually coach into those roles. And so somewhere, I think the little bit of the existential crisis also holds back, women being able to access and stay in these roles and really contribute to their fullest. So those, I feel, for me, I think are the two big challenges of our time that we need to address.
Thank you so much. Can truly relate with those practical insights you shared, that how the social sector works, how it's different from the private sector, where we are trying to solve wicked problems in this sector and we don't have any set template for the solutions. Moving on, Shriya, I would like to ask you that in your journey till now, you have worked with multiple organizations in multiple sectors. What are some of the factors that have acted as support structures for you, be it at the ecosystem level or at the org level or at the personal level, which have allowed you to succeed in the leadership position the way you envisioned, the way you wanted?
Yeah, thanks. And Samar, resonate with so much of what you said. So I started my professional journey with, I grew up in a very conservative household. And when I graduated college, it was a family business. And basically dad said, come work till you get married, right? Pretty much, right? And then it basically became from that to me setting up, two factories and the business growing to an extent that dad actually shut down his business and the business I started became the core, right? So I think that, the self-belief and the belief that you can do more, or you take whatever opportunity you have and you run with it, is also kind of very core to succeeding in whatever you do, right? Everything doesn't have to be given on a platter. Everything doesn't have to be big. You start where you are and you keep building, and you can build whatever you do with the support of the ecosystem. I think has been core to whatever different parts of the journey. I think some exactly opposite to Summer, my journey in the social sector actually started with me being a mother, right? I'd quit corporate when I became a mother, took some time off to spend with my kids. And I remember very distinctively the first smog hit Delhi, right, in 2016. And I felt helpless, right? I said, with all my education and connections and money, I can't protect my children from the smog. And it really hit me to say that, with all that we have, if we cannot actually do something to improve the lives of everybody around us, really, what am I even doing for my own children? And that's when I actually moved to the social sector to try to see if I could make a difference somewhere in some way and form. And I think in the last decade that I've been here, it's just been really fulfilling. I think the distinctiveness about the sector, though, really comes from the number of female role models that you have. I think I'm not really across all the different roles in corporate sector that I've been, I've not seen the number of female role models that you have here. And actually, even when I was thinking about moving, Prachi was one of the few people that I looked up to, and I said, how did you make? And, there were people that I could reach out to and talk about these things, right? To say, how do you balance these things? How did you make the transition? And overwhelming the feedback or the conversation was, do it, right? Don't even think about it, like just do it. So I think that having people to look up to, people to have conversation with, the openness of people to take out time, I think all of us probably spend a majority and a part of our time actually mentoring people, like open to conversations. People reach out on LinkedIn, we make time, we speak to them, help them think about avenues to enter the sector. And I'm not sure I saw that in the corporate world, right? Just the willingness to make those pathways for women to enter the sector. Actually, people, it's not women, but just that openness, and therefore having that many more women to look up to, is just something very unique about the sector that I've found. And I think because of that, some of the inbuilt flexibility is there, right? Exactly to what Samar said, because there's been so many more leaders in the sector who are already women. Some of the flexible systems are built out already, and therefore, it's easier to be here to say, I'm willing to work hard, but my time with my children, or I have blackout hours, or I, will, not do XYZ. It's just somehow much more accepting of that, right? And it's not just women leaders. I find that very accepting, even in male leaders that I worked with. People are just think a lot more about these things, right? So I think in many ways it's already set up, because we think so much, we read so much, we work in the sector, we already design systems around having more flexibility and support systems for women, and identify women leaders and pathways for women. And I think one of the things that McKinsey, even at IIC and McKinsey, very much to Samar's point, was that, and again, I'm not sure why this happens, but we do see a lot more young women automatically kind of being more attractive or wanting to work in this space, right? Even when, at this current role in McKinsey, there'll be multiple times when I'm on all women projects, right? And you'll generally find like one guy in the team of 3 or 4, and just there's an empathetic lens, there is a sense of kind of giving back, etc., that maybe comes slightly more naturally to women. I'm not sure, but we do just see a larger number of women even wanting to be in this space.
Thank you, Shriya, for sharing your personal experiences and your personal story. Shruti, would you also like to reflect here on your journey and share some insights on how has been the path for you and what motivated you and how how does this position look like when you are leading some initiatives in this space?
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you so much for having me here. And I think I completely resonate with both Shriya and Samar in a lot of things that they said, right? Again, I come from like a corporate background as well. Like I started off my career with Franklin Templeton, KPMG, etc. And I think just the stark difference that I saw when I moved to the social sector in terms of the empathy that people have, in terms of the number of women leaders that we had, and also what Samar said, right? For the longest time, and that person is in the audience I see, we used to crack a joke. He was the only male member in our team of like literally 15, 20 women. And we would say he's a diversity candidate, right? So we literally were trying to hire so many more men because, like, again, Shriya said, we had a lot of women in the team, in the sector overall, both at junior positions and at the leadership positions as well. But I think just in terms of my own journey, again, I come from a business family as well. And I also come from a family where no other women was ever working. So I'm like the first working woman in my family. And when I kind of set out to kind of do my chartered accountancy or my MBA, a lot of my relatives were like, if she's so educated, we won't be able to find a guy for her, right? So that was, and I still hear that for a lot of women, in different families, in different contexts. So things haven't really changed, even from a society and family perspective, in spite of women getting really good education. Marriage is still like the top priority. Having children is still the top priority for a lot of women. And people or women, even who are choosing to do this otherwise, have to face a lot of flack from the society. Having said that, I think definitely the kind of peers or the professional network that we get in the sector, I think people are a lot more open about these things. People are a lot more accepting. And I think just that entire conversation is a lot more inviting, and it like creates a safe space for you to be in, right? So I think that has been like a huge motivator. Apart from that, I think for me personally, when I shifted from the corporate to social impact, it was like a huge moment for me because I was also kind of taking like a 50% pay cut. I was in like, I was like, working with, I was going abroad for a lot of my consulting assignments. And I think one of my cousins then told me, why are you doing this demonetization of yourself, right? In some sense, which was very funny. But I think looking back, I think it's very important when we have, and for me, it was more towards moving towards my ikigai, right? I had this very strong feeling that I wanted to be in the sector. I wanted to work for the country. I wanted to work on gender. And just because I didn't have enough role models in my, circle at that point of time, I didn't know what were the pathways. Right. So I think I went through the regular route of CA and MBA, and I didn't get into any development studies then. But just when I kind of, I came across an opening with Satva, I met someone literally at the lunch, at a conference, at a lunch conference, and we kind of got talking, and that kind of made me make the shift. But I think the idea is it's okay for women to take like a step back, whether it is in terms of financially or a role or whatever it is, because I think that was very important for me to move forward. Like it accelerated my journey very fast because then I was doing something that I was very passionate about, right? And that helped me give my 100% to things that I was working on. So I got to work across different sustainable development goals projects. So we also worked with MSDF. I worked with Shriya briefly as well. So we worked across different thematic areas, got the opportunity to work with different set of stakeholders as well, from government to nonprofit to foundation. So being at that intersection, I think was very, very useful, both from a perspective and exposure, but also my own personal enthusiasm, motivation to kind of just do more and give more, which I think also led to the acceleration in my growth path, later on. So yeah, I think those are some of the points that I'd like to add.
Really inspiring to hear that, Shruti, that you were the first working female member in your family, and now you are setting the role model and example for others and the pathway ahead. Now coming to you, Nidhi, you have been working in the edtech sector, so I would like to ask about what role do you think the education plays in empowering women to take on the leadership roles?
Thank you so much for the question, Darshita. And hi, everyone. Nice to kind of just lovely to hear everyone's reflections on this. And this is actually to a point of both what Shriya and Samar, I think, was speaking of, and what Shruti was also echoing, is that in this sector, you'll actually find a lot of this synergy, even on this call. I hear all of us being able to relate with what each of us is saying, to the point that I'm not even going to kind of like sort of echo again, because very much relate to sort of like being the first woman in the family, the education bit. Like I just laugh about it still, because like very much face that case. Sort of if she goes to Harvard, like where are we going to find the guy in our Samaj who's as educated and stuff like that? And just it's so it is a very warm sector in that sense, and in that sense very much echo that there is already a lot that we've been set up for. And to just answer that question, what more could we probably do, is to actually recognize this. Very much to what Shriya's point was, that there is already natural inclination for people to come to social sector, and I think that is where there's for women at least, there's an insight there on why that is. Because sort of the space allows women to be, it's not just about women, but like the feminine ways of being. What I think Samar was speaking of as well, is that if you have a certain bent of doing things, or if you want to question certain things, the sector allows for it a little bit more than what corporates do. And I've also done both. I've been very fortunate. I was always wanted to work in the back in education, at the intersection of education and technology. So always, like from the beginning, in the last 12, 13 years, I've only worked at the intersection of ed tech, policy, management, and stuff like that. But it was both for profit as well as not for profit, both in India and US. So even when I was in for profit, there was a social mindedness to some extent that in the roles in the organizations that I was in. And I think just recognizing that, hey, why is this happening? And recognizing that, allowing the feminine nature of being and actually seeing it is not just opening up opportunity for women, but rather like the sector actually requires that, right? Like, and that's why there is that space. And now then taking the cue of that more of, whichever organizations are maybe not doing enough of that, or even in corporates, right? Like if you want to serve certain markets, like being able to understand that, speaking the language from that you speak of, right? Like being able to understand your audience, being able to, so it's not just about increasing opportunity or diversity for women, but that what women bring to table is actually naturally going to improve your business case and make your organization more robust, and make your organization a lot more strengthen the org culture a lot more to what makes sense in the next decade, and so on and so forth. I think just very consciously talking about that, that the feminine space of being, the leadership skills that the feminine ways of being, not just women, bring is actually valuable. Once you actually elevate that more consciously, there will be more and more women being able to join and grow up in the ladder a lot more, because that's what you're looking for, and that's what they naturally right now bring, given the social conditioning. Both men and women bring a lot of social conditioning from generations. And if you value the conditioning that women are right now bringing, it creates a lot more opportunity. And then the second thing that I would definitely say is that spaces like this, where I think someone spoke about being just more open to mentoring and talking to people and just being real about it is hard. It is really, really hard to manage some of these things and balance some of these things. And being able to talk about it a lot more, and those stories being heard a lot more for everyone, kind of allows everyone to ease into it, and more women can then grow in their careers. So yeah, in terms of what roles does education play? For us, I think, I mean, again, I actually believe that without education also, people take on a lot of leadership roles. There's a woman who came to Navgurukul from Muzaffarnagar in UP around, she's 17 years of age. She saw some injustice happening to a woman at her in-laws' place. There was some physical abuse going on. And this woman, as a part of, she was working with an NGO at that time, and as a part of just a 17-year-old person, took a lot of leadership, wrote to all different police officers in the area to kind of like highlight the issue, and actually brought a lot of light to the issue that was going on. And then this girl came to Navgurukul as a student and has been taking a lot of leadership roles within Navgurukul as well. I think what really education needs to do is actually people already have it. The light gets dwindled over a period of time because of the other kind of messaging and limitations that get imposed. And what education really needs to do is to actually remove all those barriers and layers and let the light be shine. So create opportunities for people to actually take up a lot of leadership, take action, fail. So at Navgurukul, the campuses are very, and I can tell you a little bit more later about what we do, but the campuses are student-led in the sense that they run the campus pretty much all on their own, run the budgets, run the discipline, run the kitchen, a lot of these things. And learning is also self-paced. So students have to, you create so many opportunities that even though they are fearful, they have to take the center stage every now and then. And when they fail, and that's okay. And that's being really encouraged. A lot of my funders, when they visit to our campuses, are teams, 60% of Navgurukul teams is women, and people are women and also from Navgurukul alumni. So then kind of like they speak to funders, they talk about whatever is natural to them, and what works. If it's a click, it's a click, and if it's not, it's not. And then we bake that as a part of our work. It's okay if some funder doesn't find that alignment or doesn't get wowed or jazzed by what we do, and that's fine. The cost of that is actually much better because these people get this opportunities to speak and then they go on to kind of like do a lot. So I think education really just needs to allow for spaces for people to come and take leadership instead of saying that, oh, you are too young, or hey, you don't know this, or you shouldn't do this. If you just allow that inbuilt leadership is there in a lot of people, just not hindering it is the point of the.
Thank you, Nidhi. Very insightful to hear your personal journey and also the great work you are doing at Navgurukul, empowering girls from the humble backgrounds and allowing them to take positions by creating platforms for them. Now, moving on, Samar, I would like to ask from you that what role can the organizations play and how can they foster an environment that supports and promotes women in leadership positions?
So I think maybe I'll try and put 3 examples, again, building a lot on, what some of my co-panelists said. Like, first, I think I'd just like to acknowledge what Nidhi was saying, is that you just have to create a space for people to be themselves and express themselves in the way that they are. And so I think as an organization or as an organization leader, don't get too stuck on like this is the only way of being, or like this is what my ideal leader needs to look like. And I think again a lot of generational conditioning has also told us that typical like corporate leader in the sector has to be like and I was just even globally, right, like it has to be a white male 6 feet tall, like complete alpha, has to know exactly. So, and I think we just have to acknowledge that there are 7 billion people on this planet and they are genuinely all different. So I think for an organization to actually hold space for different types of people, men and women, and so many other forms of diversity that we have around caste, religion, sexual orientation, age, like I think many of these barriers just need to be broken. So I think if organizations can create space, if they can flatten some of their hierarchies to just give everybody an equal voice, I think that's probably like one big change I think as organizations and organization leaders we need to make. And at least that's something I try and keep front and center, that I like try not to box people into different things and just remain as open. And I think again, just building on what Nidhi said, sometimes I found that people with lesser experience and younger are actually able to grow into leadership roles much faster than somebody who has many years of experience and has a certain way of thinking. So that's one piece. I think the second one is again to invest like more thoughtfully in building leadership and to think of it as a journey that the individual is on, and not just to gauge a person by their acts or the output or the deliverable that they are bringing about, but really I think if as organization leaders you can really zero in on the potential of the person and actively play a role in cultivating that potential, then I think the organization also grows. Otherwise it's just like you're just filling people into boxes and places. So I think thinking a little bit more strategically about like the leadership journey or the development journey, and being very intentional. If you want to create a diverse organization, then making sure that you are creating pathways for enough diverse roles, and also thinking a little bit more critically about whether this pathway does it really lend itself to all kinds of leaders. So I think that for me is the second piece. Like one is holding space. The second is investing more deeply behind building leadership and, kind of almost allowing that leadership to express itself versus, trying to create something. And then I think the third one, I really do feel that the like core challenges around flexibility, the care economy, like women, and I think hopefully, eventually men too, to be able to play the roles of like, work and family in a productive way. I think we as a society have a long way to go on that. Like these are still boxes, like people come to work, they put their phones on silent, they switch off from everything that's happening. If my child is sick, then I have to just be at home and, my child is sick and I'm really sorry I can't come to this meeting. And I think like as a society now we have enough money and resources to hopefully, at least in some types of workplaces, not be constrained by these hard boxes. But I think just being able to really meaningfully solve for flexibility, allowing people to slow down, ramp up when they want, is another, like, I think that's a big unlock that can happen. I don't really have very concrete solutions around it. I watch a lot of Indra Nui's videos and she always inspires me because I think she's just one person who's done it really and has been at the top of her game, like leading, like a huge US conglomerate in a very competitive space. So, and I think she talks also a lot about really how do you bring together these spaces of work and family. And I think that's an important organizational agenda as well.
Thank you so much, Samar, for sharing those practical approaches which the businesses can adopt in their strategy. Shreya, now I would like to ask from you. You have worked in the healthcare sector in the healthcare interventions, and we believe that improving women's health has positive economic outcomes, and it's the first of an issue of the health equity and inclusivity. In the context of healthcare, what are some of the systematic barriers you feel that women face in the leadership roles, and how can these be addressed?
Sure. So I'm happy to answer that, but maybe just 2 minutes on what Samar had said as well, because spend a lot of time actually now looking into, how do you actually create more women or, gender equitable workspaces. And I think the one thing that we looked at, we did this report last year on women in startups. We're doing this large women in the workplace report this year with 100+ corporates in India. And I think the one thing that we systematically heard, to Samar's point, is culture trumps policies, right? So you can have the best of policies in an organization, but until and unless you have leadership and a culture embedded that really wants to make that change, the policies are just a phase, right? So you can have a law that says you have the maternity benefit or you need to have a creche. We realize that less than 90% of corporates today comply with that, right? Even when you do comply, you have less than 10 to 15% utilization of daycare facilities by women, right? Because culturally, it's still not an acceptable thing. So then bringing into focus and saying, what are the 3 or 4 things you can really do to actually lift women? Create a space for you to be your authentic self, right? Create open spaces, actually have forums, have women-only forums, but let women speak, right? Like the ability to speak up without fear is actually very, very important, because you need to be able to bring up, many things, but have a safe space. That means that, you are not afraid that this is going to reflect badly on me in the future, right? Organizations that can do that, it really makes a difference. Personally, for me, I came back to the workforce after my first child. It took me a long time to come back to the workforce. How, what will happen to him, who look after him? And it was because Honeywell at that point had a Flexi Moms program that was structured in a way that allowed me that flexibility to work in a really interesting role, but also, work 30 hours a week. That enabled me to have the self-confidence to say, yes, I can manage this, right? So creating programs that are flexible and allow women the space to create their own pathway, right? So it's not a one-fit-all solution. Everybody doesn't have to work 9 to 5. You can choose 2 days a week to work. You can choose, I'll only work 9 to 5 or 9 to whatever, 3. Just gives you the flexibility and encouragement to then come back into that space, right? And again, a lot of organizations are designing amazing policies around that, instituting and then making sure you have things like blackout hours, where we say that, okay, these couple of hours is me as a young mother that I need to spend, and respecting that as an organization, right? Again, goes a long way in encouraging. And this is not just for women, right? This is for men as well. They need to spend time with their children as well, right? It's not just women that need to spend time with their children. And then I think the last one, I think, just to answer on that point, is sponsorship. And again, this is not women's sponsorship and mentorship. This is core sponsorship from the organization to say that we will support you in your journey, and having a specific women's sponsorship program is, and sorry, this is not social sector only, right? This is all organizations, but it's one of the most powerful tools, right? Having leadership invested in your growth, to Samar's point, and having, sponsorship programs designed around that can really kind of, move the needle on having more women in leadership roles. So that was a few kind of things that we learned in our journey. I think on women in health specifically, the one of the biggest things that, and if people haven't read this book, the book that I highly recommend is Invisible Women. I think it really kind of showcases the fact that investment into women's healthcare products, innovation, scientific R&D is so minimal today that, most of the drugs we are taking today is actually tested and designed only for male bodies, right? To the extent that even dosages of what is written on a medicine is actually for a male adult, not a female adult. So women are most of the times over medicating because we're taking too large a dosage of medicine that we're supposed to take, right? So first step is actually making, and this is all commercially led because men have been, breadwinners. So you're saying, okay, men will invest more in their health, women don't invest, so we will chase the money. So either having, strategic investment that is long term to say, yes, we need to invest in women's health because it has long term impact. And then actually, first of all, starting at that value chain to say we need to actually put investment into scientific R&D towards developing women health products, right? I think that's the first step. Second is women's health awareness, right? I mean, I think women just are not aware of the number of, I think the understanding of your own health is so minimal, right? As we go through it, and now, I'm in my 40s and I'm experiencing all kinds of issues, and nobody's ever talked to me about, right? Like my mother has never talked to me about, because nobody ever spoke to her about it. So just understanding of women's health awareness, creating forums to talk about it, being okay talking about it is, now we started openly talking about menstrual hygiene. We're still not talking about menopause, right? We're just nowhere, the conversation doesn't exist today. So how do we make awareness? And there's so many more things. I'm taking like very surface level things, but how do we bring this into mainstream conversation? The symptoms of a woman heart attack are different from the symptoms of a male heart attack. And women don't today know that. So when they actually experience a heart attack, they're not actually, even sounding the alarm because they don't know that they're having a heart attack, right? So those are just fundamental conversations around women's health that need to be had today so that women become more awareness. So second bucket is creating more awareness. And then the third is creating access, right? So women will always put their health. This is in rich urban families, this is in poor rural families, women's health always comes to the end, right? We've had interventions, you would have heard this, right? You have the government's scheme for pregnant and lactating women where they give, certain amount of food and ration. And we had this experiment where women in this particular region were not putting on weight, right? At the level they were supposed to. And those people couldn't understand what was happening. And then they realized that the women were taking the food home and giving it to their in-laws and their children. They weren't actually eating it, right? So then they changed it to say you have to eat it while you're here, right? So women will always put their health at the end of the ecosystem because that's just culturally, we were talking about how this is embedded in our psyche, will always be last, right? Like my mother today will still eat after everybody's eaten to say, no, whatever is left over. And I will eat first. And she'd be like, but your kids haven't eaten. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm an adult. I need more food, right? So that it's so hard for them to understand that how can we put our needs first? How can our health come first, right? So I think there's a whole lot of things that need to be kind of behavioral change, actual investment, awareness, supply chain that needs to be solved for women's health to become an important topic.
Thank you, Shriya. I absolutely resonate with that. Just contributing to the behavioral change and contributing to access and awareness is most difficult, but still, we have done some bit of fair in the social impact initiatives we do. I think there's still a long way to go for this in our ecosystem. Coming to you, Shruti, you have done some incredible work at Satwa, working with with Nidhi, with ACT grants and some many org-level initiatives. And now in Intellecap, you are building solutions at the intersection of gender and climate. So would love to understand from you what specific initiatives or interventions or skill sets women bring to the table when they work in the D&I sector in the gender domain.
Got it. Thanks so much for sharing that question. And completely again resonate with Shriya on the health. In fact, I was recently reading Invisible Women, and all of these facts, like in spite of us feeling that we know so much about the sector, it was like every page or every new fact was like, oh shit, I didn't know this, right? So completely, I think there is a huge lack of data and awareness and how products are designed and created. And I think just to add to also what Nidhi said, right? And from that, I recently read another book called Shakti Leadership. And today we also have Mahashivratri along with Women's Day, and honestly, Shiv is like one of the epitomes of equality. So if you look at all the male gods which are worshipped in the Indian society, and look at Shiv, his personality is very different to all of them, and he gives literally equal rights. And everything between him and Parvati is at an equal level. So also the Ardhanarishwar aspect that you look at it, right? So that really helps us understand how not only women, but also men have a lot of feminine energy, right? And which has again, through multiple centuries and generations, been suppressed. So just to say that a man doesn't take care of the family is wrong, and that we haven't given them an opportunity to do that, and we don't give them that space to do that as well, right? So when we're talking about this entire work-life balance, it has to be for both. It can't be just for women or just for men. It has to be for both, and both have to be equal contributors at home. Only then will we see women being able to take more leadership and ownership at work as well, right? Because otherwise, the stakes are against them, where they have to like overwork at work and then overwork at home, which is unpaid and not counted, right? So that literally brings me to my work at the intersection of climate and gender. And again, we have like a couple of projects currently that we're working on. One is specifically with financial institutions and organizations, also looking at fund managers, PVC ecosystem, and the entire industry. And again, I was speaking to someone else, and we are doing a industry-wide survey as well here. And we realized that a lot of PVC firms where we have women fund managers, women investment officers, or women CXOs in anywhere in their management team, they're much more likely to fund women entrepreneurs, right? And a very interesting insight someone recently shared with me was when fund managers look at men, they look at potential, but when they look at women entrepreneurs, they look at risk. What if she gets pregnant? What if she leaves? This will get deprioritized. She won't take entrepreneurship seriously if she has kids. Or so this is like the general undertone and very inherent unsaid bias, but it seeps into a lot of decision making that then seeps into the funds that women as entrepreneurs get access to, right? So this is something that we need to start changing, challenging, and it can't just be that you should give equal amount of money to women. It has to be a lot more nuanced, right? So one is that. Second, also, I think just from an overall perspective, we see currently you might be aware that with, the 73rd and 74th Amendment Act that we had almost 30 years back, we have 14 lakh elected women representatives across our panchayats. So these are women who fought elections, won elections at a ward level, at a municipality level, right? And a lot of them are considered dummy candidates, but at least even if like 10% and 20% of them are active, we again have reports in India which very clearly say that these women who have been in charge of these local panchayats were able to bring out positive change across education, healthcare, wash, sanitation, and they've made an incredibly positive change compared to other male members in their local localities. So the idea here is, and with the 33% reservation bill that we have at the national level now, again, we will take some time to implement it, but till then, can we create this pipeline of women policymakers who can then move on from these local panchayat to a state level to a central level? Our own president is coming from a panchayat. She started off as a panchayat leader 30 years back. So we just need to kind of develop, adequate training, support systems, funding mechanisms for these local grassroots women leaders who then kind of go on to become leaders at a national level, which then in turn obviously will create more equal policies, have more, again, empathy built into all the policies that we create, right? And again, there have been studies which very clearly prove that apart from obviously local level, even when we have more women in corporates, boards, or even in like fund managers, they board from an economical standpoint also they perform better, right? They have a higher focus on, environment, sustainability, governance. They have a higher, a compliance there as well. So I think having more women is not obviously just good for business, but also for the sustainability of the society. And again, if you look at a lot of women entrepreneurs, you will see 90 to 95% of women entrepreneurs have a very strong social aspect to whatever business or solution that they develop, right? So inherently, we've seen that women have this very, very pro-society, pro-sustainable mindset in like what they do in work, but also in their personal lives. And again, all of these concepts have become very in fashion right now, but recycle, reuse, reduce, all of this has been like literally being practiced by ages and generations by like all our grannies and mothers and even ourselves, right? Multiple different ways. So the idea is to, if we want to really, make this as a part of our society, if we want sustainability to be embedded in our workplaces and in our work and in our personal lives, I think having women leaders at the forefront is very, very, very critical. And again, another interesting fact is that we say no to plastic, right? That's become like the buzzword. Did you know that plastic was in fact invented to actually reduce the use of paper so that people don't cut trees, because plastic is reusable, right? And now we are going back to replacing everything with paper. But the solution is not in replacing one material over the other, but in like reducing your consumption, right? Today, we are in an overconsumption economy. And if we really want to get into that sustainability space, we have to like reduce consumption. And I think women better than anyone else have been doing that for ages. I think just letting them be like, I think Samar said, will kind of enable us to create these spaces for them to lead organizations and policies across our countries. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Shruti. Very insightful. Along with the implementation, we need to focus on the policies and programs. And also, I recently came across the McKinsey's report, which highlighted that if women are in the leadership position, they are more inclined to contribute towards the sustainability and D&I initiatives, as you told through examples. Coming to you, Nidhi, as a leader in the education space, how do you approach the challenge of making technology and education more accessible to women and girls from the humble communities? And looking forward, what innovations you are planning at Navgurukul to further support women's leadership and empowerment in the tech sector?
Thank you for that question, Darshita. So I think in the beginning, Mohit spoke about 4 different areas in which you folks work in order to address gender equality. A lot of those elements play a role in how we design the programs and how we approach education in order to make this accessible. So for example, child marriages is a very real concern. Low learning levels is a very big concern. Economic barriers, not being able to, not having funds to be able to access formal education. The physical access to some of these higher education opportunities, which will then become pathways towards tech opportunities, is also a problem. So our flagship program is kind of designed to address all of these things. We work with women who have just finished 10th standard. They can come to Navgurukul. It is a free program for them. They don't have to pay anything for it. Once they are at Navgurukul, their food, their stay, their learning, their placements, everything is taken care of by Navgurukul. As long as they remain invested in their own learning, we ensure that we never ask a student to leave because of their, and we've done an innovation where the learning is actually self-paced, peer-led learning. So it's not a classroom cohort-based learning where we have to say that, hey, your 1 year or 2 year at Navgurukul is up. If you're not placed, you still need to go so that you can create space for the next cohort to come in. We work with a learner until we get them a job. So all of those elements we've kind of like really worked on. But so because of academic performance, we never ask a student to leave, but we ensure that we check, and we have created systems to check for, are they inherently motivated? Are they invested in their own learning? So that we ask them to, hey, like, we will do everything that you need. If you have the volition, no other external factors will become a problem, but you need to continue bringing in the volition to keep everyone invested in the learning. So that's kind of like the overall system that we've designed. Once at Navgurukul, and we've in fact also in the past supported students to get to Navgurukul. For example, a girl has interest in coming, has gotten selected at Navgurukul and all of that, but the family is saying, hey, 1.5 years away at a residential program, far away from home, we don't know what this is too good to be true, nobody kind of like does this, right? Like, why would anybody kind of work with you until you get a job, minimum 20,000 after just entry-level engineering roles. So and there are parents or mamas, chatas, etc. will be like, hey, this doesn't sound right. And so, but the girl really wants to come. We have in fact paid for their train tickets to actually get to Navgurukul as well in the past. So to really design a whole program, that what are the different barriers that they have. The pedagogical solution is such that from wherever they are, they can start, as opposed to in a classroom methodology, you have to start from where the classroom, the average starts. So there's a bunch of these solutions and technologies in order to track this pedagogy. It's almost like an andragogy, which is very different. How do you track for whether learning is happening? How do you know when interventions need to, early interventions, if the progress is not happening in a week by week, how do you design for early interventions? So we're building a bunch of these solutions. We've created a lot of these solutions already, and we are open sourcing it. So anybody who wants to kind of like take this playbook and run with it to create Navgurukuls of their own. We are building all of this from a very core principle. Whatever is needed for a girl to get from point A to actually having their own financial independence, which then leads to a lot of social agency. My co-founder actually very proudly claims that out of the sort of many women that we have placed, only 4 or 5, we have placed 710 students so far in through our residential program in tech opportunities. Women like these, like a girl coming from Kishanganj, father's a rickshaw driver, mom's a domestic worker. She's working in Mindtree for the last 5 years, is earning a lot, like year on year. Her progress is there. Her salary currently is about 8-9 lakh rupees. And she's become fully independent, right? Like she decides before she came to Navgurukul, she wouldn't travel for even 2 hours away from home. And now she's traveled up and down the country all by herself. So when we design all of these things, like one of what leads to the financial independence then leads to social agency as well, which allows people to make who they want to get married to, whether they want to get married, when they want to get married, whether they want to have kids, how many kids do they want to have. When women come to Navgurukul, sort of like if they don't come to Navgurukul, they would have been married in within 6 months. The 17 years of age is a marker where this happens very often. And instead, like out of the women that are in workforces in Navgurukul, we know of like 5 or 6 women who have gotten married and rest haven't gotten married. It's a question to think about that where will they get married, because you've shifted so much from their communities for them. I want to now think about how do we ensure that they're not socially isolated. But so that's how we approach very holistically. How do we make sure that they need, if they have the volition, they have everything else, nothing external kinds of gets in the way of being able to lead a life of financial independence.
Thank you, Nidhi, for sharing those stories from the ground and the approach you are adopting end to end at Navgurukul. Very insightful to hear that.
Just to add, in terms of the question that you have, what are the structures that you're building for them to get to leadership positions as well? Navgurukul hires its own alumni quite a bit and ensures that they progress in the pathways. And we are now working with the alumni to ensure that they are progressing in their own, wherever other organizations that they are in as well. And we are tracking not just percentage of women, but we're also tracking percentage of salaries, which I think is a very interesting metric to track. Which I think all organizations, corporates, not just like if you have 40% women participation, but hey, they are in largely tech support roles, which are not going to progress anywhere. That's still not gender equality. So how do we think about roles and opportunities where you have both salary participation and power participation?
No, thanks for highlighting that. Very insightful. I now request the audience to please drop your questions in the chat window, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions you would like to ask from our panelist. Feel free to raise your hand. We can take the questions one by one. Sure. Meantime, we receive questions from the audience. We will. So, according to the report and survey by Dasra conducted across 300 social sector organizations, the findings were that women comprised close to 53% of employees across the designations. Yet only 34% of them were in the managerial positions, and only 19% of the organizations were led by women. And as each one of you said, that creating the right support system, creating an ecosystem is really important for women to thrive. So would like to ask, what are some of your ideas on creating an ecosystem of support for young women professionals in the social sector to survive and thrive and succeed? Any one of you, Shruti, Shriya, whosoever would like to share your insights.
Yeah, I can probably share a thought there. And I think we've been talking a lot about mentorship and the support the system offers. And I again would love to like use a framework from my Indic philosophy and culture. We talk about Arth, Dharm, Kam, Moksha, right? And it's like a Maslow's hierarchy kind of a thing. I think we don't talk about Arth very significantly as much as we should talk about. And that's the financial security that we all need to build, right? A lot of times, and specifically in the social sector, we see men and women both, they aren't like, you move to the social sector because you don't give money as much as importance, right? Because all of us have at some point of time taken a pay cut, and we know if we kind of get out in the corporate world, so to say, we'll probably get double of what we are getting, right? But the point is not that. I think the point is for you to build a financial base which kind of gives you that security. You spoke about people starting on their own, right? When will people start on their own? When they have that security that they have enough for their family needs, right? They have created a regular source of income, which because of which they don't have to be dependent on a salary. That's when people generally kind of take that leap of entrepreneurship. And for us to build that base, right, it's called FIRE in financial terms, financial independence, retire early. So, how much of a retirement corpus can you build with regular, again, systematic investment, being disciplined about it, knowing about financial investments early on? So, even if you, in fact, I took a session this morning. If you start like a simple SIP of 5,000 or even 15,000, right, you can build like a huge corpus in the next 15 years, 20 years. And that's when you kind of build that base of 5, 6 CR to start on your own, anything that you want to start on. So I think having that financial security is very, very important. Second, I would also say, again, we'll have to kind of create these systems and structures. One, externally with the fund managers, with the financial institutions, where women start getting more finance to start something that they want to work on, but also internally in terms of internal organizations and the women themselves, right? When they start feeling confident that they can run an organization independently, they can scale an organization. Again, if you look at the numbers, a lot of women entrepreneurs are very small scale, right? Because then they're satisfied with whatever, basic pocket money kind of money that they're making. So I think we need to change this both internally and externally. And I think having, again, mentors and creating a peer learning space here makes a huge lot of difference in how you're able to kind of take control of your finances and then start something that you really, really are passionate about. So yeah, those are the points that I'd say from my.
Thank you, Shruti, for sharing those very practical points onto how can the organizations can implement this in practice. Shriya or Samar, would you like to chime in here and share your thoughts, maybe?
I think the only thing I'll add, which is a little specific maybe to the social sector, is the safety aspect. I think a lot of work that happens on field, and there is. I mean, even when I was leading the IIC program, and I had to send people in field, I always did have that little back at the mind thing that, right, I'm responsible for both men and women, but with women you do feel a little bit slightly more anxiety, and I do feel like that translates sometimes into, I mean, both, right? A little bit of burnout, a little bit of, safety, security. It's hard, right? I think when you have a core, because you can't do social sector work without being on the field, without kind of being, with the government, etc. Right? I mean, you can, but it's harder. So I feel like at some lenses, those things start playing a little bit, and you start kind of thinking about those factors and maybe taking a step back. And I still haven't figured out the right solution. At IIC we used to do a lot of training for both the men on our teams as well as the women on how do you kind of create a ecosystem around this. But it's hard, right? And I think the only other thing I personally feel a lot about is you are working on things that are very you're working among people that are very different, like you, the kind of problems you are exposed to on a day-to-day basis, it starts seeping into you at certain point of time too. So differentiating your reality with the reality of the world, it I don't know, it gets hard, right? So even when you are taking your children out for a lunch, or you're buying them things, and then you kind of go and work in the places you work in, and then so I think balancing that out, balancing kind of the intensity of the work, the stress of the work, sometimes I don't have a solution, but I think those are things that we face, which is a reality of the work we do.
Thank you so much, Shriya, for sharing those personal anecdotes. We'll now just take questions from the audience. We have got a few questions. So I'll start with Akshat's question. Technology plays a pivotal role in shaping modern societies and economies. How do you each see technology transforming the landscape of women's leadership and empowerment in the coming years?
Repeat that question. I just want to.
Sorry.
Darshita, could you just repeat that question once?
Sure. Technology plays a pivotal role in shaping modern societies and economies. How do you see technology transforming the landscape of women's leadership and empowerment in the coming years?
I think two ways in which we think a lot about this is that technology careers are one of the best ways to kind of bring in do the leveling field. So creating access to technology careers, which is what Navgurukul's flagship programs has been about, is a huge thing. More and more as technology is becoming less about analytics rather than the application of it. Like with the advent of AI, there is already a lot more sort of not just the hard skills of technology and the sort of like writing the code, but hey, what of it? I think there is a role for women to play a larger role in that conversation a lot more as well. Not that the previous cannot, and we've successfully been placing a lot of women, and I think that is there. Now there is an inherent natural strength that one can play on with that understanding. Just thinking about the so what of the technology, like how can it transform all of the different sectors that we talk about? For example, what Shriya was speaking about, the innovation around just healthcare products, women being a part of it, and technological solutions that can come and actually playing a role in at the forefront of designing some of these what hypothesis could be and then leading those research is actually there's a huge opportunity there. A third way in which how we think about this is that technology allows actually, especially information technology careers, allows for remote work a lot more than a few other sectors do. And that allows for a lot of these balances that we are talking about quite a bit. And hence tapping into that as where more and more women participate, where there's very little participation right now, actually. The numbers are, I mean, different reports will claim anywhere between 14 to 27%, but realistically speaking, if you don't look at inflated numbers and if you look at pure tech roles, there are less than 10% women, especially as you grow higher up in the ladder, even less so. So there's a huge opportunity there to kind of create pathways to enable much better participation and leadership. How we are personally, internally thinking about this at Navgurukul is that anyway, there's an opportunity. We've been placing people in tech, so they've been earning decent salaries. Now, how do we make them owners of the work that they do in tech as well? So there's a opportunity to create a tech services cooperative equivalent, the Amul equivalent in tech services, largely the engine being women-led. And kind of redistributing the profits. If you buy an Amulka chocolate, the 70% of the profits go to the farmer, whereas if you buy Dairy Milk chocolate, 10% goes to the farmer. How can we bring this equivalent in tech services? India doesn't have that. Europe has some of it. India don't have it. US definitely doesn't have it. So how do we think about that is something that we are thinking about quite a bit.
Thank you, Nidhi, for sharing your experiences and insights from your working at Navgurukul on how to address this. I see a few more questions from the audience, but I will really appreciate if the questions are pertaining to our session for the topic today. If you have any specific questions, we'll be happy to take them offline and with the speakers. And I see a few questions which we have already covered.
Maybe Nidhi, we take this question on women in community settings. I think how do you encourage women to speak up? Because I think that's a good point, right? We do see, especially in corporates, it's interesting, right? But women do speak up less. You'll see that. I think there was a research done by Generation that said women apply less for jobs that they are qualified for, and men apply a lot more to jobs that they're not qualified for, right? So how do you actually create those open spaces and encourage women to speak up? I think like personally, I think having women only spaces, I mean, I know it's not encouraging to speak up, but having those spaces for women only at least enables them to speak up. One of the things I found was actually interesting that is I feel like we don't give enough feedback, or we don't actually work enough with women on things like self-confidence, body language. We maybe we are always taught to like it's very simple, right? I go for walks and I see men walking, and I see that the woman walks away, right? But the men keep walking. It's never the man who walks off the street, right? So just helping build up the self-confidence, to look people in the eye, to speak up. How do you have presence? These are also some things that we can think about when we talk about mentorship and coaching. But would love to hear from others as well, right? How do you get women to speak up more in community settings?
Happy to answer that, Shriya. We do a lot of this. Last year, for example, just before Women's Day, we had an incident in one of our campuses where the girls were very scared. There was some perpetrator that did some outside of the campus, and there were all our students were super scared to step out. And we kind of encouraged them to go out and do flash dancing. So we actually went our campuses in a rural setting in Anarkat outside of Bangalore, and we actually took all our girls and said we will do flash dance. So we took like large speakers in the middle of like a village kachoraha. We like set up a flash dance thing, and everybody did that. And there were people who were very like, hey, why are you dancing here? What are you doing? But then there were people who came up and be like, hey, this is amazing to see. And that conversation is actually shifting that conversation. What are you wearing, right? Like, are you wearing shorts? And not to say that you shouldn't be contextually aware, right? Like if you are in an area where wearing shorts is not okay, do that. I don't necessarily want to do that. But if you are wearing that, then not carrying that shame and not carrying that lack of confidence and all of that. So just encouraging a lot of this flash dance kind of thing. Just hearing like we've done this in the past, like there were girls who were very afraid of cemetery, and we were like, we'd take them to a cemetery and like ask them to spend some time there and stuff like that. Campuses are very, very kind of like if for example, there's a leakage on the roof, right? Like instead of us saying that, oh, the team member will go and fix it, we be like, okay, why don't you go and speak to plumbers? Why don't you find quotations? Why don't you do the budgeting? Here's the campus budget that we have. Why don't you now do the planning of like, where do you want to spend how much and how do you decide? And actually allow a lot of these decisions and create failure points, right? It's okay, right? Like we say that, okay, if you overspend on a budget, this month we'll all go hungry. We'll all go hungry together, and that's fine. But like creating some of these failure points. And as we've grown, actually creating the failure points has become easier and easier, right? Like when we were doing this when we were 30 people, we were working only with 30 people. Now we have these budget backups as well that you go and do this. Even if you fail, we'll take care of it, right? Like, but you do some of like creating a lot of these opportunities, speaking up in communities. We have a curriculum which is called ETC, English and 21st Century Skills Curriculum, which works a lot on inner work. Women are carrying a lot of trauma. You'd be surprised. I mean, the numbers of abuse and harassment is what we all know of, but 10-15%, anecdotally speaking, from our own audience, we know that have gone through some kind of a sexual harassment or abuse within their own homes. So they are carrying a lot of these traumas. So sort of like letting go of that, you need to explicitly work on it. Sharing circles, spaces. There's a bunch of this curriculum and pedagogy that we've developed. I'm happy to share more if you want to talk about it.
Thank you, Nidhi, for sharing that. We have a few more questions. We'll take them offline since I see these are outside the context of our today's conversation. Now, coming to a close, I would really like to thank all our panelists for their time today, for such an engaging discussion. And if I were to summarize all the learnings and insights from the session in three points. First, it's very important for women to create opportunities for themselves and have role models and examples to look up to. For example, as Shriya just mentioned a few minutes ago, that women have the imposter syndrome. They apply to the jobs only if they meet all the checklist items. Rather, men apply only if they meet 50%. Second, for organizations to support gender equality, it's very important to have flexible policies and initiatives and flexible programs. And third, we should, from a community point of view, it's really important to focus on the awareness and the access part, and from the improving the mindset and the behavioral of the ecosystem we are in. With this, I'll just hand it over to Mohit now for the closing remark and for announcing the next steps.
No, before thanks for this, and and thanks to all the panelists for the insightful session. And before I may close, may I ask a question? Darshita, do you have the?
Sure.
Okay. So when I was thinking and listening to all these insightful things from all the panelists, one thing was coming to my mind, and most of my question is mostly anecdotal. And all the four panelists, I think, have a stint in the private sector, moved to social sector, and have experienced both the sides of the game. Anecdotally, what I see is in the social sector, at least in the social sector, I do see a fair participation of women, as I think fairly balanced to an extent that I've seen at quite a few organizations. And I believe that would be similar in other spaces as well. However, in the private sector, if I look at it, despite many an attempts, for example, many organizations have flexi leave policies, they have daycare facilities, some of them have the safe transportation facilities. Somehow the participation there remains restricted despite all the attempts. So if maybe two suggestions, if you can share that, what are the learnings from the social sector that you can take it towards the private sector to encourage wider participation of women, given that you have experience of both the sides, you know the operations of both the sides, what would those couple of suggestions be? Maybe we can start with Samar, you.
Yeah, I think maybe I will take advantage of what Shriya said earlier, right? That I think a lot of policies are there and people don't take advantage of it because I think the culture somewhere implicitly is actually holding women back from taking advantage. So I do have the option of taking a cab if I'm staying in office like after 8 o'clock. But I will not do that because, it's like in my head, it's not safe for me to actually be working after 8 o'clock. So I think like there is a need to do a little bit more deeper problem solving as to what is the real issue around, why those services are not being availed. So I think that's one piece. And then the other thing I have felt again, like if I think about my experience in the corporate sector, somehow I just felt like it was kind of empty and not meaningful enough, right? Like, I mean, the cabs were terrible. They didn't really make me feel particularly safe. Or, like I'd be like, the hotels, because there's a cost, like you have to meet a certain cost, the hotels are kind of far out and not the best. So I think like organizations can also just acknowledge and spend more. I do feel that, like you could really create some very differential policies that maybe put women or gender or diversity on a pedestal and try and really incentivize for it. To say that, okay, like, I mean, when I was in the Big Four, for example, you have different bands for partners can stay in different kinds of hotels, associate consultants can stay in different kinds of hotels. And like, why is it that not all women associates and above can stay in the same category of hotel as a partner, right? So I'm saying, I think many of these choices we should not be forcing women to make. So that's one thing. Like, I really think that the policy has to be meaningful and it has to be of a very, very high quality. It cannot be a check in the box.
Yeah. Shruti, what do you think? I think you worked at KPMG and at some point in time, I was at KPMG as well. So we know
Yes.
the organization really well. What do
Yeah.
you think on this topic?
So I think contrary to what we popularly want to do, right? When we want to fix gender equality, we work with women. I would say let's start working with men, right? Because women already have a lot of things to do. Giving them more learning and development and more trainings just adds to that burden, honestly. I think what really made a difference also, and this was one of the stark differences I saw when I switched from corporate to the social sector, was the communication bit, right? Whether men or women, they were very, very, very empathetic. In fact, one of the clients that I worked with, they had this entire framework of non-violent communication. And there's a lot of work on this. There are multiple books on this. So I honestly, for me, it was a new way of communicating. I had to change my language of how I speak to people, how empathetic I am. And I think that is what we need to teach men a lot in corporate specifically, because why do women keep quiet, right? If you mansplain a woman, right? If you're the only woman in the room and if there's no one supporting your point, or people are just reiterating your point in different words and they are getting heard and you're not, you'll start feeling after a point of them, bol ke koi fayda nahi hai. I'll not speak, right? I think that's where the differentiation starts. So I think working with men, getting them to be more empathetic, improving their communication skills, introducing nonviolent communication, enabling them to create spaces for everyone to speak and keep their point of view, I think that will make a significant difference.
Yeah. And Shriya, what do you feel on this point?
Yeah, no, and thanks for bringing it up, Mohit. I think, when we looked at this, we also saw that in corporates, right, it's actually 50% when you start off, right? If you look at like corporate India, it's when you at entry level, it's 50-50, right? Basically, what happens is you drop off as you grow in senior roles. And then I think to the point that Nidhi made earlier, it's also the type of role you're in, right? You'll end up finding a lot more women in certain roles, which again, I think role models, etc., seem more kind of, you'll find a lot more women in HR, etc. So I think one thing that you need to, I actually also at the, when you look at the social sector, you find a lot of women in, in sales, in finance, etc., right? So the acceptability of women across a variety of roles. So I think that having a very conscious decision to say that it's not about like 50-50, it's about 50% across all roles, right? So when we are doing hiring in corporates, we have to not just have a target which you put out and saying, oh, we hired 50% of women, but we have to look across all our roles and ensure that it's 50%, because our research shows that when you look at CEOs, they typically come from sales and ops, right? But invariably, that's where you'll find the least number of women. So how do you, in the pipeline itself is broken. So you need to get more women into sales, ops, finance, accounting, right? Those roles. That's the first. I think the second is you'll find social sector a lot more accepting of return to work. So there's, again, lateral hires, women who come back to work after career breaks. That's, I think, again, that's the second job that happens, right? At corporates, you just don't find when women leave work because of marriage or maternity, etc., that coming back is a lot slower. That's when they move away from, say, even leadership roles to slightly slower trajectories, which, in many cases, I think social sector has allowed some of the flexibility. So that support system, so that they don't drop off at that point, is again things that I think corporate could learn and enforce some of those policies.
So the two common things that I've been hearing is number one, first, of course, have policies, but having policies alone will not help. Implement them in the real spirit. As Samar said, few people are staying in a different kind of hotels, which are within the city, but somebody is staying outside the city. Adds to the complexity. And the second thing that I hear is conscious shift in the behavior of men as well. I mean, they also have to kind of be more conscious. And yeah, I think these are the 2 points that are coming forth many a times. Honestly, if I can share some of these things, I think over the last 1 decade or so, and being me on the other side, I can very confidently share that the consciousness part and the acknowledgement is very much there. It's just that I think it will take some more time to be a little bit more inclusive in terms of implementing policies in the right way with the right spirit. I'm very hopeful that the things are moving in the right direction, and I'm very hopeful that in the next few years, maybe a decade or so, the things would be very different from what we are doing. So if you're doing a similar session 10 years down the line, I'm sure the topics of discussion would be fairly different. And Shriya, let's hope that that the way it stays. Okay, that's it from my side. I think. Thank you so much. I mean, I've been listening to everything, so very intriguing. I'm sure the audiences have enjoyed this particular session and learned a lot. Really thankful.